Hello everyone and welcome back to Motorcast, and today I'm back with Josh as we are going to be reviewing the F2 and GP3 races from this weekend in Spain. It's our first double header, of course, where we've had both categories racing on the same weekend, so lots to get through today and some very interesting developments in terms of the championships in both categories, of course. And starting with F2, of course, all the talk once again has been about Charles Leclerc in the feature race. Of course, he led from pole. The safety car kind of threw the strategies wide open a little bit. Leclerc obviously making an early stop with several other front runners doing the same. Safety car kind of ruined the race for those such as Giotto, who hadn't stopped, but the prime runners eventually had to try and create a gap to those who had stopped, such as Leclerc, but in the end they couldn't use their fresh rubber to get back at Leclerc at the end of the race once Leclerc had made, well, once they'd made their pit stop. So what were your thoughts on that first race then, Josh?
Yeah, great race pretty much up until the safety car. It was a major shame for me because it did kind of give a major advantage to the likes of Leclerc. I think Leclerc would have probably already won the race even without that safety car, but it was a shame we'll never get to see that kind of battle play out. Still a really, really good race, and we still had a fantastic fight for the podium with some great racing really throughout the field, as always with Formula 2. So I think a solid feature race. And as you mentioned, Leclerc, I mean, what can we say? Another pole position and another win. His first, of course, Formula 2 feature race win after getting that sprint race win in Bahrain. And he's really is setting himself up for a real championship charge. And really good stuff from Leclerc and from Giotto and Rowland as well. And incredibly, the same top three for the kind of second race in a row, which is pretty remarkable. Giotto doing a solid job for Russian time, and Ollie Rowland as well. I think setting himself up as a bit of a challenger for Leclerc, doing a bit of a kind of Marcello from last year, whereby he's kind of really getting the consistent points and podiums, and of course the next target will be the win. But yeah, overall, great race from all three of those.
Yeah, we're only, of course, 4 rounds in at the moment, but Leclerc already starting to take a bit of an advantage in the championship. 73 points now, compared to Ollie Rowland's 47 in second place now. And one thing that stands out for Leclerc at the moment is he's really having, I know the safety car did kind of help him, of course, in Spain, but he's really having to earn these results. And does he seem to be kind of a star in the making in terms of the way he's driving just so well and so consistently in every single race, whereas we don't really tend to see so much consistency from many F2 drivers all through the field. That's just a general thing that we see over the years, that the champion tends to be someone who's just so consistent over all the rounds in every race and really earns their results, always gets those kind of the top finishes in the end, whereas rivals tend to falter or have bad runs of form.
Yeah, definitely. I think Leclerc definitely stands out in this year's field. Maybe last year we had a number of kind of star quality drivers, but I think Leclerc is the standout driver really from this season. But obviously not trying to think too far ahead, but we'll just certainly for this weekend he was pretty fantastic, to be honest. And yeah, Leclerc definitely standing out and definitely doing a great job. And as you mentioned, it's not come easy. He did have a bit of help in that feature race, but we saw in Bahrain he really had to fight for that sprint race win, and it's the same in the sprint race here in Spain as well. So he's not completely flawless, of course. There will be flaws, there will be errors, but so far we've seen very few of them.
Yeah, there does seem to be kind of that consistency, as I was saying about from Leclerc, that we're not getting down the field. So obviously, for example, we saw Markelov win the first race in Bahrain, but his best finish since then has been 8th place in the end. Obviously not doing so well from the reverse grid pole in Spain. Matsushita obviously winning the sprint race in the end, but obviously it's been not really anywhere that high up the field in the other races so far. And obviously Norman Nato, who also started the season fairly well, has not scored any points since that first race in Bahrain. So it does seem as though Leclerc's consistency could be what wins him the championship. Looking behind in the championship at the moment, as I said, we've got Ollie Rowland second on 47 points. No win yet for him, but he's been very consistent. A 5th, 2 thirds and a 2nd at the moment. Did a lot of overtaking this weekend, particularly after the safety car in the first race. So do you think he'll be happy with his start to the season?
He'll definitely be happy with this weekend. I think Bahrain was a bit of a disappointment, but I think this weekend he performed very, very well. Qualified 6th, so again qualifying looking like a bit of a weak point, but certainly races he's right on it, and as he mentioned, did some fantastic overtaking in both races. So yeah, Roland definitely happy with this weekend, and of course we all know what the next step is. That is of course to win a race, and that's what he's got to do to win this championship. Last year you could kind of sail through getting podiums and consistent finishes, but this year you have to take multiple wins, I think, to win the championship. You've got to take those wins off Leclerc, so that'll be his target going into Monaco.
Nobuharu Matsushita, kind of someone who came out of nowhere really in the sprint race. We did actually mention him, I think, in the review after Bahrain, that in this sprint race it could be kind of wide open there, and there could be anyone who could really win this race due to the reverse grid, of course. And he seems to be someone who doesn't really light up the field too much, but he does have the occasional very, very good drive. Of course, he has his bad moments, such as Baku last year, but he has some fantastic moments as well, such as, of course, this weekend's sprint race. His first win since Monaco, in fact, last season. So I think that's a good first step to maybe proving some of his doubters wrong. Were you surprised at this victory, and could he maybe build on this for the rest of the season now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was surprised, but I was certainly delighted to see Matsushita get that win, because he's had a difficult. Well, I mean, since that win in Monaco, he's really had kind of a battle to come back from. Of course, that disqualification after Baku, that was such a nightmare weekend, and I think he's taken a while to rebuild, and I think Bahrain was a bit of an off weekend. And obviously Alexander Albon was very, very quick this weekend, but Matsushita, of course, managing to win that sprint race, thanks to, of course, a major error from Nicholas Latifi in the dams, of course, who blamed a broken mirror for his off, which was, of course, a major, major shock in the sprint race. Latifi leading, set for his first win in Formula 2, and then, of course, went off and handed the win to Matsushita, and handed second place as well to his teammate Ollie Rowland. So yeah, a major, major surprise there. But I think Matsushita certainly earned it, definitely earned it at the start. I think you mentioned earlier, Markelov was on pole. Had a miserable start, but both Matsushita and Latifi making the most from their race start, and really putting themselves in a position to win that race. Latifi had the race under wraps, but Matsushita still doing a great job, and certainly I think a deserved winner. And heading into Monaco, of course, where he won last year. So I think, yeah, things are looking up. Way too early to say a title challenge, but certainly a bit more confidence, which I think is something Matsushita needs for sure.
Yeah, it definitely is, you have to say. Looking at some of the rookies now, you mentioned Alexander Albon in the thick of the action this weekend. Very, very impressive. No really outstanding results as of yet, but still very, very consistent, which is always going to help as a new driver building up confidence. Then we have Nick De Vries and Antonio Fuoco. So for Fuoco, it's not going quite so well. Obviously, nowhere near Charles Leclerc at the moment, and those two having that incident in the sprint race. So Nick De Vries does seem to be quite quick in qualifying so far, but in the race it hasn't really come together for them yet. So what do you make of, firstly what happened between those two, and the starts that some of these rookies have made so far overall?
Yeah, a bit of a silly incident, I think, between Fuoco and De Vries. A really sloppy weekend, really, for Antonio Fuoco throughout. He was, I think, half a second off his teammate in qualifying. And then in the races he really struggled for tyre wear and had silly incidents, running into the back. I think it was Markelov at one point. It's just kind of erratic nature that we saw from Fuoco in his first GP3 season, which seems to be reflected now in his first Formula 2 season, which is such a shame. And he's been so, juxtaposed by Leclerc doing such a good job. It's a real, I think, struggle now for Fuoco to kind of get back on terms with his Monegasque teammate. And I think that's going to be possibly a bit too much of a task to overcome. And Nick De Vries, on the other hand, doesn't have quite as much pressure on him. Another really strong qualifying performance. Third is very, very impressive for De Vries. And he's got a teammate in Johnny Cecotto Jr. who's not really going to be putting massive pressure on him or kind of outperforming him. So I think De Vries definitely has the potential to grow. I think he's going to be one of those drivers probably by the end of the season that's going to be right up there on a more consistent basis. But kind of at this first early stage, I think he's going to get quite a few kind of really good qualifying results, and maybe a few sporadic race results, but I think that consistency is going to take a while to come. He really just needs to get on top of those Pirelli tyres, and once he does, he's going to be a bit of a formidable force, because Nick De Vries is certainly very fast, and I think maybe him versus kind of Albon and Matsushita will be an interesting one, as kind of some of them are kind of McLaren young drivers. Albon is not officially on the programme, but I think if he can beat his Honda Junior teammate, he certainly goes a long way in doing that. So yeah, that's certainly a battle, I think, to keep an eye on. Albon, of course, another rookie. doing a really solid job. I've been really impressed with him. I've been very, very good to see him doing such a good job. Didn't have quite a good sprint race as he did a feature race, but still another points finish, 4 points finishes from the first 4 races. I don't think you can ask for much more from a rookie.
Yeah, Albon certainly has done a fantastic job of settling him very, very quickly, and I'm sure Nick de Vries will be one to watch when he starts to get his consistency together, as you touched on. So looking a bit further down the order, we've got a huge list of drivers still yet to score points. You mentioned Johnny Cecotto, obviously not having the best of times at the moment, and then several more rookies in there, such as Ralph Boschung, of course, and Canan Massas once again not having such a great home weekend, and obviously Roberto Merri also coming in for this weekend. So is there anyone down that list? We haven't really heard so much about them this season with the battle going on at the front, but is there anyone there who should be really worried about the start they've made?
I think Louis Delatraz, has had some pretty bad luck, to be honest. I think there's a lot more pace in that racing engineering. Gustav Malya kind of, showed a glimpse of that, and he finished 7th and 6th this weekend, so first points for racing engineering. A much better weekend for him, but, Delatraz was rudely spun around in the feature race, recovered well to finish 11th in the sprint race, wasn't great. And same with Ralph Boschung as well. I think he finished in the points in the feature race, but then got a penalty and was dropped to 12th overall. So that was a big shame as well. So I think both of them have a lot more to come, particularly Louis Delatraz. In terms of the other kind of non-points finishes, we've got Cecotto and Canan Massas. I'm sure Cecotto will get in the points at some point, but I don't think we can expect too much from him or Canan Massas other than kind of 7th, 8th, 9th. Although Cecotto did get a podium at the end of last year, so maybe he'll be returning. Canan Massas put on a great show in the feature race by stepping out of his car and spending absolutely ages in trying to get it out. He was getting back in his car and being towed, but it's such a mess. I mean, of course everyone would have seen it, so I don't need to explain it, but yeah, a bit of antics there and getting a bit of TV time. I think he knew exactly what he was doing, yeah, Canan Massas, what can you say? Roberto Merri, of course, hopped in at that Campos in a very, very kind of last minute, decision. Coletti couldn't race due to family issues. Merri jumped in there very, very late. Did pretty well, I think, in the sprint race to come up to 12th, but I guess you've got to have more pace than that, to be honest, being a next Formula 1 driver. So maybe if he's in the car in Monaco, we'll see a bit more from him. Seti Camara is definitely rough around the edges. We saw a couple of silly incidents from him over the weekend, but maybe a bit of pace in there, but hopefully a lot more to come from him because it hasn't been that impressive so far. And Sean Gelael, well, what can I say? Another penalty, I think, this time for overtaking under safety car, I believe. Stuff like that, and drive-through speeding in the pit lane. What can you say, really? I'll leave that to everyone at home, really, to come up with your own words for Sean Gelael. And Nabil Jeffrey, last of all, of course, completing Trident's miserable weekend with a pair of 18th place finishes.
Yeah, not going so great for some of the guys down there, of course. Just to kind of wrap things up, some of the guys we haven't mentioned yet that had kind of quiet but solid weekends. Obviously, Luca Giotto, you mentioned Latifi, had a great chance to win in the sprint race, but sadly that did not work out in the end. Jordan King, obviously, having another very, very solid start to the season, kind of similar to last season, I guess, in terms of those consistent point scoring results. And then we've got Gustav Malya, who did show quite a bit of pace this weekend with a 7th and a 6th place in the end, especially doing fairly well in the start of the sprint race. Then we've got Norman Nato and Artem Markelov, who started the season very, very well and kind of seemed to go down the drain a bit this weekend. We touched on them earlier, but obviously 1 and 2 in the feature race in Bahrain. Markelov getting the reverse grid pole this weekend, but having a terrible, terrible start and only managing 9th in the end in the sprint race. And then Norman Nato 16th and 13th only this weekend, so it really has not gone well for him since that DNF in the sprint race in Bahrain. So just a few last words on those guys, maybe.
Yeah, interesting one for the Russian time boys. I mean, Artem Markelov, like you mentioned, had a terrible start from reverse grid pole, and I think unfortunately we've been proved right in what we said in Bahrain, and kind of before the season we weren't quite sure if Markelov could do this consistently, what he did in Bahrain, and unfortunately it looks like he can't, but we'll see in Monaco, of course, the scene of his maiden win in the series, so hopefully he'll have a bit better fortune there, because we know he's extremely quick on his day, and as always it's qualifying that it will always be his issue, which is a shame, but he's great in the races and great at looking after his tyres, so he'll be back for sure on the top step of that podium shortly. I'm pretty certain. Luca Giotto as well, another solid weekend for him, mirroring his Bahrain weekend with a 2nd and a 7th. Obviously you got Nicholas Latifi, great to see him up there in terms of pace, great shame that he didn't win the sprint race, but it's good to see him right up there with Roland. I kind of wrote him off before the season. I didn't think he'd be going to be able to match Roland, but he's proved he can be, and it was a great shame that he couldn't take his maiden win. But maybe with this kind of confidence, or maybe that took a knock to his confidence, I'm not quite sure, he can move on forward with this. And Jordan King, never sold weekend for him. Nato, as you mentioned, pretty miserable weekend, King's former teammate, and he just needs a bit of a boost, but still I think good for Arden, of course, because I think they've already scored more points than they did last year, thanks to that second place. Trident won't be scoring points anytime soon, and I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that does pretty much round it off. Just looking forward now to Monaco before we round things off with F2, and obviously you have to look at Charles Leclerc for this one, his home event, and a chance to really, really make a name for himself on his home circuit, and of course the most challenging circuit in the world. Obviously he'll be the massive favourite going into this one, but as we've seen in the past with Monaco, especially with the sprint race and the lack of overtaking that goes on in Monaco, also does throw up quite a few surprises in F2, and we have seen quite a few first corner crashes in the past, so obviously anything could really happen this weekend. You have to make Leclerc favourite, of course, but what would you expect going into Monaco with the possibility of Leclerc having a very, very big weekend, but also then a very unpredictable weekend possibly as well going into the sprint race maybe?
Hopefully absolute carnage will ensue as always in Monaco and GP2. It's what we want to see. Last year was fantastic, to be honest, to see Markelov take his maiden win. I don't think we're going to see that kind of majestic performance, I think, this year, but I'd expect the guys to be up there to be Ollie Rowland and Norman Nato for me. Leclerc, I believe this could actually be his first time racing in Monaco, I want to say, although someone correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. So yeah, I think, to be fair though, he's proved that, lack of experience does not stop him from winning races, so I think it could be a good fight, I think, between Leclerc, Rowland and Norman Nato, who really should have won last year, but of course Markelov's hand of God intervened and Markelov won that race. So I think expect Nato to be out for revenge, and for Ollie Rowland to be looking for his first win of the season to really lay down a marker for Leclerc, and that's what it's all about. All these drivers coming to Monaco and really trying to cement their name in history books, and most importantly lay down the gauntlet for Leclerc. And to really try and challenge him and stop him winning, because he does. I think if a driver wins really, 3 weekends in a row, then that does put them in very, very good stead for the championship. So someone's really got to break that run. And as you mentioned, the sprint race, well, that's pretty much a lottery. And I don't know. I'm going to go for Rowland. I think is going to win the feature race. I'm going to predict Rowland for a feature race win for the second review in a row. And then I think for the sprint race, I'm going to go with Jordan King to take that one.
Yeah, that seems possible, I guess, but anything's possible around Monaco in F2. For my predictions, I'm going to say Leclerc to win the feature race, and the sprint race. I mean, we threw a lot of names into that last time when we predicted the sprint race for Spain. I think one of them was Matsushita, and he did end up winning, but I don't know. For some reason, I kind of fancy Markelov to win it again this year, because he's got the reverse grid pole last time. We know how good he can be around Monaco when he wants to be. I mean, it could really be anyone, let's face it. Norman Nato, like you said, will really want to win this one, and it's the sort of race where someone who isn't necessarily challenging for the championship could easily go out and win the race maybe. But I'm going to say Leclerc and who did I say? Artem Markelov, that's it. Leclerc and Markelov to win in Monaco. So that finishes things off for F2 now. Moving on to GP3 very quickly, so we don't run on for too long. An extremely eventful weekend where it was kind of the opposite to F2 really, where our championship favourite did not have the greatest of weekends at all. Of course, through no fault of his own, Jack Aitken in the battle for lead with Niro Fukuzumi, and then suffering a mechanical failure, and he could therefore only finish 12th in the sprint race in the end, meaning that of course our championship battle is now wide open with Fukuzumi taking that victory, and then finishing 6th in the sprint race to have a championship lead of 4 points on 29 from Alessio Lurandi, who got 2 third places in the end, so a very, very strong start for him. And then Arjun Maini, of course, winning the sprint race to put himself 3rd in the championship. Then 3 drivers on 20 points, that would be Boccolacci, Hubert and Russell, with Pulcini after a very, very strong feature race in 7th place in the championship, but only 11 points off Fukuzumi at the top. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is with Aitken not scoring too many points this weekend, the championship's kind of been blown wide open. So where do we go from here then?
Yeah, I think fantastic, really, isn't it, for the series to have such a wide open championship after the first round, kind of the pre-season favourites. I think we're proved right in qualifying. Of course, we had Aitken, of course, right up there taking his first pole of the season. But yeah, Fukushima doing a great job, and we had Boccolacci and Pulcini in the top 5 as we kind of predicted, and George Russell up there as well. So I think they're kind of your 5 for the title this year. But then kind of Laurandi and Maney coming in and just blowing up the script already, with Laurandi taking a brace of third place finishes, and Maney, of course, as you mentioned, winning the sprint race. We predicted, I think, a solid season for Yenza, but I don't think we predicted them to be second in the championship after the first round, with only 2 cars, of course, compared to ART, of course, who have 4, and some of the other teams as well running 4, and of course every other team running 3. So yeah, really impressive stuff from Laurandi and Maney. I think they've got to be really the stars of the weekend for me, as well as Fukushima as well, who kind of silenced probably quite a few of his doubters, taking a great feature race win. Of course, Aitken was very unlucky, but Fukushima, of course, led right from the off, got into that first position, and although Aitken was challenging him, right before his car failure, Fukushima very well could have held on to that win. The DRS for me worked absolutely perfectly. I'm not sure on your opinion, Alex, but for me it was a very good kind of first test to say this was the first time this kind of new system had been trialled. Maybe a little overpowered on the LT cars, but I think overall a good variation in strategy, and something else really to watch out for, which I think is always good to see. And in GP3, it's a series that's not quite up to kind of Formula 2 levels of excitement, so I think this was needed.
Yeah, I think as you mentioned, the DRS did work very well this weekend in terms of the racing. It did give us something different, and as we mentioned in the preview, it can only really be good for the championship going forward. And yeah, this is something we kind of mentioned, in that even though we might not have had the most exciting races this weekend, they weren't too bad, but obviously not the most action-packed races we've ever seen. It has actually made the championship very exciting, so we might not have had that much entertainment this weekend, but certainly it does blow the championship completely wide open going forwards, which is a bit of a weird one really. But Jack Aitken obviously not having the greatest start through no fault of his own, as we mentioned. Just how much of a blow is this for him at such an early stage in the championship, and what can he really do from here? Can he still come back and take the title from this position?
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, I think he was fortunate that no one else kind of picked up the mantle and absolutely dominated the weekend. 29 points. He's not, 25 points, because of course you do get those points for pole position, which obviously Aitken got. So yeah, he could definitely overturn this with still 7 rounds left. Actually, there's not too many in GP3, but yeah, that's I think still ample time really for Aitken to claw back the advantage to his teammate. He'll be right back, I think, in Austria, and will probably win a race there. But it certainly does, I think, make the championship more interesting to kind of not have Aitken leading right from the front. Let's talk about a few of the other teams. We've got, of course, Arden, who were kind of dominated by Pulcini. Kari and Stockhurst had a pretty nightmare weekend, really. Both of them kind of having silly contact and not really being on the pace of Pulcini, who also had a pretty miserable sprint race, but of course had a fantastic feature race, taking 2nd place, and I think confirming his place as one of the GP3's front runners for this year. Trident, of course, we predicted this unfortunately before the start of the season, but Boccolacci would be dominating that team. But luckily, I think Giuliano Lacey showed quite a good pace this weekend. And although he doesn't have much to show for it, I think there's plenty of potential there. Unfortunately, not so much for Kevin Jorg and Ryan Vetter, but hopefully we'll see a bit more from them in the future. We also got Dams as well, who again, unfortunately, we did predict that they would have a difficult season, and it's not started in the best way. Calderon and Baptista were really nowhere to speak of. Ferrucci had a decent weekend, if you can call it 9 to an 8th decent. It's really up to your kind of expectations for him, whether or not you count that as decent. But certainly I think a solid start, I guess, for him, but certainly not for the team. Yenza, as we mentioned, I think arguably the team of the weekend. And Campos, Raul Hyman actually leading their charge this weekend. Great to see him, I think, on that sprint race pole, but couldn't quite keep it, of course, and I think fell to 7th, I think, in the end. Falchero was pretty good, kind of knocking on the door of points, and Sierber as well. Maybe expected a bit more from him, but I'm sure he'll improve as the season goes on, possibly struggling a bit on the tyres, which of course will be rectified hopefully when we go to Austria.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covers most of it off. Obviously, we've got this very, very tight battle at the front with Fukuzumi, despite Aitken's retirement, actually showing his very, very good pace. And then obviously in this, I guess you could call it the lead group at the moment, the top 7 in the championship. Obviously, not likely to remain that way, but for now we've obviously got Boccolacci, who finished 6th in the feature race after his mistake at turn 1, and then a very, very solid second. So like you said, leading the charge for that team very, very well there. And then Arjun Maini, as we mentioned in the preview, very, very good when it comes to the sprint races normally, and lived up to that by taking the victory there to put himself 3rd in the championship. Hubert and Russell taking a 4th and 5th place each, of course, and Pulcini having an excellent first race in the feature race to come home in 2nd, even if the sprint race didn't go quite so well for him. So like we said, not so much overtaking this weekend, but it does give no real clues for the championship. Obviously, like you said, the Genza boys doing very, very well this weekend, but it remains to be seen whether they can keep that up. So with them two kind of behind Fukuzumi at the moment in the championship, does that really give Fukuzumi a golden opportunity now to go on and build on this and maybe take the title this season? Or is it too early to say maybe?
I mean, it is too early to say, but, of course we want to talk about the bigger picture as well, because that's what's, I think on the Formula 1 team's mind, of course, they're looking, to the future, and if he can go and win this championship, that would be mighty, mighty impressive, because I believe, well, first of all, he'd be the first Japanese driver to win the GP3 series, but I think he might also be kind of the first Japanese driver to really win a major kind of largely European-based championship, which would be fantastic, I think, not only for Fukuzumi, but for Japan itself. So I really do want him to go and try and challenge, Russell and Aitken as well. We know he'll have the team to do it, of course, in ART, but he's going to face a real tough challenge, and I think, Austria and Silverstone will be a real judge of his mettle in terms of, can he go into these weekends as championship leader and really maintain it on the other side, or will he kind of have a bit of a nightmare weekend, slip back and really, fail to get back up from there? It remains to be seen, but for me, I'm really hopeful, and I think he's got, like you said, a fantastic base to build on, and I wish him the best of luck.
Yeah, Fukuzumi may be surprising us a bit this weekend, but definitely showing his championship material nonetheless. We touched on this a little bit, but maybe looking at some of the rookies now. Obviously, Pulcini with a fantastic first race, getting to 2nd. Boccolacci obviously showing quite a lot of pace and proving to be quite maybe aggressive but very measured driver, you have to say, judging by his first race, and you could say the same about Pulcini as well, I guess. Very, very quick at various points over the weekend. Obviously, a 2nd place each, and then Boccolacci struggling a little bit in the feature race, but coming home in 6th place after that mistake at the start. And then George Russell and Antoine Hubert, a 4th and a 5th each, as we said. Fairly quiet but solid debuts. So what about those rookies? Will they be happy, and can they move on from here now maybe?
Yeah, some, I think, with a lot more to go on than others. Boccolacci, as you mentioned, have that off in the feature race, but definitely made up for it in the sprint race. I expect him and Pulcini to both be up there, I think, over the coming rounds. Hubert and Russell as well they're only going to get better, particularly Russell, of course, I think has the real potential. But I think it was important for Hubert really to finish in 4th in the sprint race and to get ahead of George Russell was mighty impressive, and he's not going to be swallowed up by his kind of more well-known teammates for sure, so that's great to see. Some of the other rookies as well, looking down the field, definitely with a point to prove. Bruno Baptista, Nico Kari, of course. Well, he's not technically a rookie because he did drive last year, but you know what I mean. Certainly, I think this kind of first full season in GP3 still has a major point to prove. And Alesi as well, who showed great pace, but of course, as I mentioned, coming away with 0 points. So yeah, I think quite a few talking points there and quite a few questions, I think, as we head into these next few rounds. Plenty to still unravel, and as you mentioned, this championship at the moment is still too close to call. Yeah,
as you mentioned, Raoul Hyman having quite a good weekend, despite only finishing 7th from that reverse grid pole. Santiano Ferrucci also finishing in the top 10 in both races, and plenty of the drivers, despite not having any points so far, having a fairly solid first weekend and quite a good base to build off. So moving on now to Austria, and I guess the main question from this is where do we go with the championship, and can Jack Aitken come back? So we've asked the questions already about who might be able to pull away. Can Fukuzumi build on this, or will it be a story of kind of Aitken coming back over the course of the season? So what do you see happening in Austria then? A couple more predictions, I guess, to finish things off.
Well, I mean, Aitken could be back in that championship lead, by Silverstone, to be honest, by the end of that weekend. For all we know, it might not be a season-long battle, but then again, it might be. It all depends on how the other drivers perform, and if Aitken is indeed going to win this championship, we don't know for sure. And that's the great thing, I think, about this opening weekend, because it's kind of thrown a lot of the previous expectations up in the air. But yeah, I think kind of similar drivers that were challenged today in Barcelona will be challenging again in Austria. Having said that, there is quite a while to go until Austria, so plenty of time. I think there is also a mid-season test as well, so the drivers and the teams are really going to be working very, very hard then, and maybe that would actually act as a bit of a reset really in Austria, because you've got Austria, Silverstone and Hungary all within a space of a month. So really, I think when we head into Austria, we'll get probably a bit of a better picture as to who will be kind of fighting for this championship. So maybe this weekend is kind of a bit of a start-up weekend, a bit of a kind of, drivers finding the feet, and then Austria, I think, is possibly where the real season fight will begin. So in terms of a prediction, I'm going to make a bold prediction and say Aitken will be back in the championship lead by the midpoint of the season, which is after the Hungary round.
Yeah, it seems realistic, if maybe a bit of an uphill battle for Jack Aitken, but it's certainly possible, judging by the speed that we've seen so far. I guess Fukuzumi will definitely have something to say about that, but going forward, you would possibly fancy him to do quite well in Austria and maybe take home his first win of the season, which he threatened to do, of course, in Spain before that retirement. But anyway, that is going to be it, guys, for our review of the F2 and GP3 races from Spain this weekend. Leave any thoughts you have in the comments of this video on this weekend's races, and maybe what we might see going forward in terms of the both championships. Now we've got kind of a feel really as to what we are going to see this season. But anyway, make sure to leave a like and subscribe also to Motorcast for more motorsport content, and follow both of us on Twitter. Our links will be in the description for more motorsport talk. And yeah, that is going to be it, guys. Bye for now.